The best way to sum up the topic that we're trying to address is how do we get more people engaged in more ways with civic engagement? And so that's kind of the broad stroke of what we were looking at. We identified 3 top issues. The first was looking at the capacity of nonprofits to actually effectively manage and engage volunteers. The second one is how do you measure the impact of volunteers, not just in terms of what they're doing, but the difference they're making in communities. And then thirdly, how do we create better understanding between companies who want to provide volunteers and the needs of nonprofits who need volunteers. And one of the themes that you'll see throughout all 3 of these issues in terms of the strategies that we came up with is communication and mutual understanding. It came up in every single one. So the need for that collaboration, that communication, and mutual understanding is absolutely critical for all these strategies. So we'll take the first one in looking at the capacity. And one is, nonprofits have to do a better job of making sure that they're understanding what they need and asking specifically around what they need, as well as communicating their own constraints that they have to engage a volunteer workforce. An idea was to have companies provide some of the operational analysis expertise that they have resident within their companies to help a nonprofit assess their own capacity and develop strategies to tackle that. Another area was, nonprofits have to be careful about seeking funding and engagement for areas in which aren't a high priority for them. So just don't chase a dollar or chase a relationship. Make sure there's good alignment between those. And set realistic goals. Don't go after more than what you can handle as a nonprofit agency. And that really starts with creating a plan, making sure that you've identified your needs effectively, and then you've got a strategy for obtaining, training, and communicating with your volunteers, and then identifying those measurable outcomes, which really ties into the second issue of how do you measure the impact of volunteers. And it starts with the communication process of being able to communicate the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, that you're making a difference in those communities, and specifically define the impact that you're trying to achieve, and define that impact in terms of the difference you're making in the community, not just in terms of the stuff that you're doing. And that's where the difficulty really arises, and the challenge that the nonprofit sector has in translating the activities that they undertake and the impact and difference that it truly makes in the community, particularly when there's all these other variables and factors that influence a particular outcome that you're trying to accomplish. So some more work really needs to be done around that. And so you have to be reasonable in what you're defining of what success looks like, and focus on a few key things rather than the one big thing. There's not a nonprofit that's going to solve homelessness or end poverty. But are there specific, very tangible things that you can grab onto that your nonprofit is impacting, and really kind of latch onto those outcomes and measure your impact around that. And then lastly was making sure that there's better alignment and understanding of companies' needs and the nonprofit's needs. And so the thought was that it really starts with the relationship that exists between a corporation and that nonprofit. And that if there's a better, more longer-term relationship, that mutual understanding actually emerges as part of that relationship building. And so finding ways to create more effective longer-term relationships was critical, and more communication and understanding is a big aspect of that. So some other kinds of things that we talked about was making sure that you understand, again, specifically what your needs are so that you can specifically communicate those to your corporate partners. And that requires also an understanding of where each party is positioned and what their goals are. And so nonprofits should do research on a company's CSR strategies and objectives and what their areas of focus are, and making sure that there's a fit and an alignment between the mission of the nonprofit and that company's CSR goals. Corporate social responsibility goals. And so some things that we can do in the nonprofit sector is to, communicate with senior leadership of companies about what the nonprofit's engaged in, being very clear and concise about what those particular needs are, so that we can find that common ground and common alignment and understanding. And then another thought was that, there's a role that companies can also play in understanding the nonprofit sector. And utilizing some of the skill set that resides in every company in the corporate strategy and business development office, assessing the marketplace and other competitors. You can apply that skill set to assessing the nonprofit sector and looking for those nonprofits who are best in their space, that there's alignment between strategy and objectives, and who can offer that corporation the most quote-unquote value, if you will, for the engagement with that nonprofit organization. So those were kind of the big ideas, the big things that I would come up with.
Right.